Hey, welcome! So today we're going to dive into a massive global health crisis that starts with something incredibly small, a single mosquito bite. We're going to follow the amazing and frankly terrifying journey of the microscopic parasite that causes malaria. So to really get a handle on the scale of this, just look at this number. 1 to 3 million. That's the estimated number of people who die from malaria every single year. It's an absolutely staggering figure, and it makes it crystal clear that this isn't just a disease, it's a global challenge. And you know, the weight of that challenge isn't shared equally. This chart, well, it shows the stark reality of the situation. About 85% of all malaria infections happen in Africa. This concentration is a huge factor in how global health initiatives have to approach the problem. So yeah, let's frame this correctly. We're talking about a global health crisis that's driven by a tiny, but incredibly clever, parasite called Plasmodium. And get this, it's not a virus, it's not a bacterium, it's a single-celled organism with a seriously complex life to lead. Now, here's what's so fascinating about this parasite's strategy. It can't just survive and reproduce in one place. No, it has evolved to split its life between two totally different organisms, two hosts, just to complete its full life cycle. And here are our two hosts. Think of it like the parasite has two completely different phases of its life. Inside the Anopheles mosquito, it undergoes sexual reproduction, mixing its genes. But inside a human, the strategy flips completely. It becomes all about rapid asexual multiplication, basically just overwhelming our body's defenses. Okay, so this double life really sets the stage for what is basically a biological spy thriller. Let's follow this parasite's journey step by step as it invades the human body. Our story kicks off right here with something called a sporozoite. When an infected mosquito bites us, it injects these little needle-shaped things into our bloodstream. These are the initial secret agents, and they have one mission and one mission only: get to the liver and fast. So once it's inside a liver cell, the parasite changes, becoming a schizont. This is its hiding phase. It just quietly hijacks the liver cell's machinery and turns it into a little replication factory, making thousands and thousands of copies of itself, all while flying completely under the radar of our immune system. All right, so after about a week or two, that little factory inside the liver cell just bursts, and it unleashes this massive army of the next stage, the merozoites, right into the bloodstream. This is where the real assault starts, and their target are red blood cells. Once it gets inside a red blood cell, that merozoite develops into a trophozoite. Now, what's so important about this stage is how it looks. It forms this very distinct ring shape, and that is exactly what doctors and lab techs are looking for when they look at a blood sample under a microscope. It's the visual proof, the smoking gun, that tells them a patient has malaria. So this all brings us to a really important question. The parasite's been multiplying this whole time, but what's actually causing the classic horrible symptoms of the disease? Those intense cyclical fevers and the debilitating chills. Well, the answer is pretty dramatic. The parasites are brilliant coordinators. Millions of these infected red blood cells all rupture at the exact same time, releasing a whole new wave of merozoites and a flood of toxic waste into the bloodstream. It's this massive, synchronized assault that triggers the violent immune response we experience as malaria symptoms. But wait, the story gets even more complex. See, malaria isn't just one single thing. The disease is actually caused by several different species of the Plasmodium parasite. So let's meet the main villains in our story. One of the sources we looked at had this really memorable way of describing the 5 main species that infect humans, borrowing a line from the musical Chicago. Now, while there are 5, we're going to focus on the 4 most common culprits. This table really breaks down the key differences. Let's take P. falciparum. Its fever cycle is the fastest, just 36 to 48 hours. This super fast replication is what lets it just explode in numbers, overwhelming the body, which is exactly why it's the most deadly. Then you've got P. vivax and P. ovale. Their cycle is 48 hours, but they have a dangerous trick up their sleeve. They can go dormant in the liver for years and cause relapses later. And finally, there's P. malaria, with the longest cycle at 72 hours, which can lead to a more chronic, drawn-out infection. To tell these species apart, scientists have to look for some unique visual clues in a blood sample. For instance, P. falciparum makes these really distinct crescent or banana-shaped sexual cells. They're called gametocytes. And P. malariae creates schizonts that look kind of like a rosette. These are the little fingerprints the parasites leave behind at the scene of the crime. So, knowing all this, how in the world do we fight back? Okay, let's zoom back out and take a look at the key strategies for diagnosing and preventing this disease. The absolute cornerstone of diagnosis is the blood smear test. It's a pretty straightforward but incredibly powerful process. First, they take a blood sample. Then it gets smeared on a slide, and a special stain is added to make the parasites pop. And finally, a trained eye looks at it under a microscope to find the parasite and even figure out which species is causing the trouble. And finally, prevention. It's all about a multi-layered defense. It really just starts with being aware of the risks. That leads to bite prevention, covering your skin, using repellents. For people who are at high risk, anti-malarial drugs can act as a kind of chemical shield. But the last, and maybe the most crucial layer, is speed. If someone gets infected, getting a prompt diagnosis and starting treatment immediately is what saves lives. Which kind of leaves us with this final thought. The Plasmodium parasite is a master of survival. Its life cycle has been perfected over thousands and thousands of years. We've figured out how to interrupt its cycle with drugs and how to fight its mosquito host. But as we look to the future, with new challenges like drug resistance on the rise, the big question remains: which part of this parasite's incredible journey offers the next best target for finally defeating malaria for good?